Okay, you guys ever see Naked Gun? All right. You ready to start? So welcome to Lean Daily Management Training. This is primarily aimed toward leaders. However, anybody's invited and anybody's welcome to listen to or join the training. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ajay Baghdadi. I am with Systems Engineering, the acting chief. It's a new service that Mr. Samuels created to help us really focus on and bring process improvement to the front of the organization and get some importance. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of months. And today I'm going to talk about lean daily management. So before I start that, I actually wanted to start with what I consider to be the bottom line up front. Because we're going to talk about a lot of things. I go through a lot of detail in terms of process and the pieces of what is lean daily management, how does it work, and we're going to go through some definitions and examples. But before I get into any of that, what I want to emphasize for you is that the primary purpose of this thing called lean daily management is frontline staff engagement. That is the primary purpose, frontline staff engagement. Everything else that we talk about in the next hour is going to be secondary to that. So that means if we roll out a process and that process is not working for the staff, then we need to find a different process. And ideally get the staff to help develop something that works for them. It's not about you will do it exactly this way because that is what's been rolled down and that's what we were told to do. That's not what we're trying to accomplish here. The primary purpose is
Frontline staff engagement.
there you go, frontline staff engagement. I need a signal, like should I do that? Would that work? No. I'm gonna go like this. How about I do this, right? If I do this, you guys say
Frontline staff engagement.
Frontline staff engagement. Okay, let's try one more time.
Frontline staff engagement.
Okay, so every time I do that,
Frontline staff engagement.
because I'm gonna mention it about 50 times.
We need an acronym.
Yeah, FLSE. FLSE. That's what I mean. So frontline staff engagement. That's really what this is about. And like I said, you're going to hear me say that at least 50 times in the next hour, because everything else is secondary. So before I start, how many of you have heard the term lean daily management? Or daily management systems? Does that sound familiar? How about tiered huddles? For those of you who have raised your hands. Does that sound familiar, this whole huddle process? We're going to talk more about that in the next slide, but in this one I wanted to mention lean daily management. I've been just devouring material about this, and in particular I've been actually studying this for about 4 or 5 years now. It's just been a topic of interest of mine after I started visiting some organizations. And I've had the good fortune of I've been to about 8 or 9 different facilities, VA, private sector, DoD, that do this, and I've had the opportunity to see it work firsthand. And in all of those conversations, usually what happens is I go out and I'm visiting, and I'll catch some of the frontline staff who do this, and I'll say, so when they first rolled this out, what was your reaction? And inevitably, everywhere I've been, the frontline staff all said the same thing, the supervisors, the frontline staff, they all said the same thing. We thought they were crazy. When they came with this whole, you're going to be huddling every day thing, and it's like, oh, we thought they were absolutely nuts. And actually, I just had another former commander of an Air Force facility who said the same thing. He said, when we rolled this out, everybody was just kicking and screaming. They did not want to do it. So after about 6 months, he said, I just said, guys, I'm sorry we made you do this. Why don't we cancel it? And they unanimously revolted and said, no, you will not take this away. Because what happens is frontline staff, remember I said the number one reason is?
Frontline staff engagement.
Frontline staff engagement. So what happens is if that works, then they won't let you let go of it. And so everywhere that I've been, I've asked people, like, what do you think? And they said, well, initially we thought they were crazy, but once we got the hang of it, we realized that this became the most important part of our day. This became the thing that actually made all our other work better and easier. And like I said, this commander, he's our coach for the organization, he came in and he said that what he found that was, they were really going for better processes and better care and safer care. But what ended up happening is that the staff morale went up significantly because their jobs got better, the environment got better, it was safer, and better for patients, and that made the staff feel better, and things became more efficient. So we'll talk more about how do you get from where we are now to there. So in one of the books, and I have in your handouts, there's a reference in the back. I have a reference page, and the very first one is this book. It's the Lean Daily Management for Healthcare Field Book, and it's written by a couple of guys. I happen to know one of them. He's local, a good friend of mine, Jerry Berlanga, and I really like their definition here. It says a disciplined system. We'll talk a little bit more about discipline. Because that's a key word for discipline. A disciplined system for developing our staff, aligning our efforts, and building a holistic and meaningful improvement system that helps us achieve our goal, which in the case of South Texas is the goal of high reliability. Now, high reliability we'll talk a little bit more about again. But that it's not something you achieve, it's something you continuously strive for, and you actually never really arrive at high reliability. It's a journey of constantly being better and better. But how do we get there? So there's the three pieces, and you'll see how it aligns to what I said earlier about frontline staff engagement. So we're starting by, we're actually developing our staff. And then we're aligning the efforts, and then we're creating this mechanism, this holistic mechanism for improvement. So this is that huddle piece that I was talking about. And before I get into the huddles, I just want to mention that that's going to be the focus of the discussion today. And we're starting with the huddle piece. However, something that I hope everyone realizes is that Lean Daily Management System actually has 4 components of which huddling is one. So really what it's about is it's number 1 is leadership discipline. And the term they use is leadership daily discipline. So it's that daily discipline. We continuously do this every day no matter what, where it becomes built in and hardwired into our jobs. And then the second piece is the huddle. And then the third piece is leadership grounding. So leadership going out and actually interacting with the frontline staff, which we started last week, the executive leadership team. That's the band that was formerly known as the Quad. They're actually going out and grounding their frontline staff starting last week. And then finally, project management. So those are the 4 components of a Lean Daily Management System. We're just talking about the one little slice because that's where we're starting this journey, and we're going to add the other pieces as we go. Right? So Lean Daily Management System. So in that huddle, so the tiered huddling, how does that work? What does that look like? Well, what I'm going to describe to you here on this slide is actually what I would consider utopia. This is what it would look like in a perfect system. Doesn't necessarily come out of the gate looking like that at all. And we've already experienced that. We started this week with some areas on the ground level, and it's clunky at best. And some of the areas it's just not really, we haven't developed our rhythm. The other organizations I've talked to, they've said it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years to get to a system that you really like. And then you feel like, okay, we've got a good rhythm going now. It can take about 3 to 5 years to really get to that point. And some folks are, like for example, St. Luke's Baptist, we had a chance to go visit them recently. I was there when they first started rolling this out 7 years ago, or 8 years ago. And what they said is that just now this year they feel like they finally hit the sweet spot after that many years of working through it. Because it just takes time to develop and build and change a culture. Because that's really what we're talking about, is changing a culture. So utopia, what does utopia look like? Well, in utopia, what would happen is you would have this frontline staff, team, multidisciplinary huddle. And I say multidisciplinary because, and I love the analogy that Mr. Sandals used when he said, going back to his football days, I know nothing about football, but he said going back to his football days, for those of you who play, it's about huddling with the team that's going to be out on the field in a few minutes. So you're huddling in a way that you say, okay, we are the ones who are actually going to be, and the phrase he used was, he said, the people that work together huddle together. The people that work together huddle together. So how do you get that team? Because can you imagine a football team where you have the linebackers over here huddling, and the receivers over here huddling, and then you've got the quarterback talking to himself over here, and then they all go out into the field and try to play a play, right? It wouldn't make any sense. It's the folks that are actually going to be out on the field talking about, okay, what are we doing? And so that's really what this frontline staff huddle looks like. It's, all right, we are the folks that are gonna be spending the day with each other today. We're gonna be working together. Let's talk about what this day looks like for us as we go out into the day. And so that's that frontline staff multidisciplinary huddle. And the goal, the dream, the utopia is that we'll reach a point where there aren't any silos. So we're not trying to establish and build and make stronger silos, where you have nursing is huddling, and MAS is huddling, and the physicians are over here huddling, and these folks are over here huddling, but rather that it truly is that multidisciplinary thing. And the goal of this is to break down those silos and have more of those dynamic, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary huddles. So what is the role of the supervisor in that huddle? So a supervisor, initially, the way I see the role of the supervisor is supervisor, that frontline staff supervisor, comes in and is maybe initially leading the huddles and having those initial discussions, and they're leading the huddles and they're saying, let's start with this, and how do we, it's like coaching and modeling the huddle to the staff. But ideally what would happen is that after some time, maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a month, maybe a couple of months, that supervisor would step back into the shadows. Just kind of slowly move out of the limelight and say, Rena, you haven't run the huddle in a while, why don't you step up and run the huddle today? I can't run the huddle, I'm just a lowly blank. It doesn't matter, it's not rocket science, you know how it's going, come on, you run the huddle today. And then you just step back and let that person run it, and then eventually what happens is the team will run their own huddle, and the supervisor's there to answer questions, provide guidance, and to say, hey, it sounds like you guys may be stuck on that, why don't I take that piece and you work on the rest, right? And so that's kind of how that works. And so the stepping back and allowing them to really take that piece. So as I mentioned, it's about frontline staff engagement, right? So we want to activate, we have a huge resource, 4,200 employees, some bright, intelligent, creative, innovative people. How are we going to get them to fully engage in the organization? And you look at me and you say, yeah, but you don't know the group that I work with, right? You have no idea. All they do is complain all day long. They just see problems. They don't even understand solutions. Okay, what's a start? If we can at least get them engaging in the conversation on a regular basis, and we can build that piece, then what happens is we can open the doors for that communication. And so then that huddle would filter up to a service level huddle. And what would go there might be then nursing may identify something that's of concern and say, you know what, let me take this up my leadership chain. Because they're part of this multidisciplinary huddle, right? And nursing might say, you know what, I think this is more of a nursing issue, let me take it up my chain and we'll report it that way today. Or another day it might be MAS might say, you know what, let me report it up today. And they take it to an MAS leadership huddle and say, okay guys, I just came back from 1G and we're having this issue, we wanted to make sure you guys knew about it. And so we would elevate that to a service level to see what can be fixed there. And then finally that would go up to an executive leadership team level, kind of the highest level. And then we would take it to morning report where at that point we can talk about all the things that are systemic to the organization, things that really fall there. So I skipped the purpose, so let me go back and talk about the purpose. You'll notice at the very top of the slide I have 3 bullets. They're also in your book on page 8. So on page 8 you'll see the same 3 bullets at the top there. And I'll give you a tour of the booklet in a minute. But the 3 bullets are the purpose of why are we doing this lean daily management. Number 1 is to establish a daily cadence. Many of you recognize that term, cadence. For those of you who are in the military, you may recognize it as a march, a rhythm. There's a beat, right? A daily cadence. So initially what might happen is you might see in the huddles that folks are meeting and either everybody's got nothing, or they're all just standing there, nothing, I got nothing. Or what you might see is that everybody's trying to bring world hunger to the huddle. And you're trying to bite off what you cannot possibly bite off in a 10 to 15 minute huddle. Because these huddles are meant to be 10 to 15 minutes. 15 minutes max. So at the 15-minute mark, you say, that's great, does anybody have any burning other issues? Otherwise, we'll pick up from there tomorrow, right? Because you're trying to establish that daily cadence, that daily rhythm of how much can we bite off and chew in 15 minutes. So establish a daily cadence, and there's that word again, right? Establish a daily cadence for frontline staff engagement. So where we give them this ability every day to be part of the running of this facility, of this organization. And so that's where that establish that rhythm, that daily cadence. The second one, I call that what's in it for me as a manager, right? What's in it for me as a manager? Okay, great. We're engaging the frontline staff, but what are the managers going to get out of it? Well, I think this is a win-win. This is an absolute, so what's in it for the manager and what's in it for the employee? And that is the second bullet that says, empower frontline staff to problem solve at the lowest possible level. Because I don't know how many of you have ever felt like anytime the frontline staff identify an issue, they immediately tell somebody and then they go running off to go do their work, right? But do they get involved in problem solving? Are they there saying, wait, I want to be part of the solution? And there's some literature out there that says you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. Which one's it going to be? There's no in between. Not doing anything, you're automatically part of the problem. So you have to engage to become part of the solution. And what we want to do is allow frontline staff the ability to engage at that lowest level and problem solve at the lowest level. There's a really nice book. I don't know if any of you ever read the book Drive by Daniel Pink. Does that book ring a bell? I'm surprised no one yet in any of my classes has said yes. It's a fascinating read. It's very interesting. So what he talks about in Drive is what drives people, what motivates people, what gets them really excited and going and performing at a really high level. And in his book, what he talks about is he says that if you're dealing with something that requires zero intellect, zero intelligence, then just basically you're doing something that's like the same thing every day, you don't have to think about it, there's no intelligence required whatsoever, you're just pushing a button, right? There's nothing involved. Then the carrot stick model works well. Reward, punch, reward, punch. You can get what you need. You know, you push the button enough times, we're going to give you a reward. If you don't push the button enough, we're going to punish you. And I'm not using my brain, I'm just pushing, right? But if you really want to activate people and get their brain turned on to full mode, and you want to reward them, then the best way to do that is to give them a problem and let them solve it. That is the true reward. There's like something in that just activates people and it drives. It's something in the human mechanism, in the mammal mechanism, that just wants us to fix things. And it basically says that if you can throw a party, you can give somebody a bonus, but that doesn't compare to give them a problem and let them fix it, and the amount of satisfaction they get out of that, and the amount of thrill that they get out of it. Then they're like, what's my next problem? Bring me the next one, right? And so that's what we're trying to do. So that's why I say it's a win-win, because the supervisor's like, wow, I'm not spending all my time putting out fires, because the frontline staff are solving 90% of their own problems. So I'm only dealing with the ones that they truly need help. So I actually feel like I have time to be there for them, to listen to their problems, to engage with them, to support them, to help them, to coach them, to guide them, because I'm not spending all my time trying to fix every single little thing that goes wrong in this area. Because they're fixing that all themselves. And it's so cool to watch them do that, and how excited they get when they solve a problem that they brought forward. And then finally, the last bullet is to create a mechanism for rapid escalation of staff concerns. Now, there's two pieces. One, that's the first thing everybody thinks about when they think about the tiered huddle. You'll notice I have that as number 3. Right? It's number 3 on the list. But the first thing everybody thinks about the huddle, oh, this is all about how do we get information up to the top. That's number 3. But the point is, it's about how can I open up the channels of communication so that information is flowing in the organization. I don't know how many of you feel like you yourself or other people in the organization, your peers, your employees, are completely in the dark. You feel like, I have no idea what goes on. I had no idea the secretary of the VA was going to be here next week. It's like, hey, what's with the Clydesdale's out and back. You know, it's like you have no idea because where's the information flow, right? There's no information flow. So the example I've been using is my best friend in the whole wide world, after my wife, of course. My best friend in the whole wide world is the guy I went to college with. You know, he lives in Houston, he's my best friend. He's the kind of guy, I could call him at 2:30 in the morning, a.m., and say, I need you. And he will hop in his car and be down here in 3 hours. Period. No questions asked, and vice versa. If he called me tonight at 2:30 and said, I need you, I would be in the car down there, and I would call from there and say, hey guys, I'm sorry, I had an emergency, I had to go, right? That's how close of friends we are. I haven't talked to him in probably 4 to 6 months. We're that close. I know if he called me tonight or I called him tonight, we'd be, and every time we talk, it's like we've been talking every day, right? But he's not the guy that I tell about my daily problems to. I don't tell him about all the little irritants that are driving me crazy every single day. By the time I talk to him, I'm only telling him about the really big stuff. Oh, let me tell you what happened. My kid's going to college in the fall, and I got this going on, and I got that going on. I'm telling him about the good news, the bad news, but it's the big stuff. He doesn't get to hear the little tiny things that happen in my day. The person who gets to hear that is my other best friend, who I talk to every day for 5 minutes. How'd your day go today? What happened? Because the lines of communication are wide open. So I don't know if you've ever felt like as a supervisor or manager, if you've ever felt like, something happened in your area, and like 2 days later you find out about it, and you're thinking to yourself, how on God's earth did nobody think that somebody should tell somebody about this? Well, what were you thinking? And like, well, we thought we would. And my example on that one is I have, one time it was either OIG or Joint Commission came in. And they identified, we actually got cited, they identified there was this dashboard that we were required to keep that had 9 months of data missing. 9 months of data, it was like blank slate on one of the services. And so afterwards, I'm talking to the QM clinician who was over that area, and I said, how did this happen? And we didn't even know. We're in QM leadership, we're looking down and going, how did we not know that you didn't have data for them? Well, I've been trying to work with that service. I didn't want to get them in trouble. And I know you guys are so busy. You're so small. I didn't want to bother you with this. So I said, wow, for 9 months you've been pulling your hair out, trying to address this, when I could have gone and talked to the service chief of that area, or even gotten the quad member involved and said, hey, what can we do to help move this along? You were trying to put out a problem that you couldn't solve, trying to resolve something that was beyond you. So there's a balance, right? On the one hand, it's trying to solve every problem without telling your boss, and on the other is every single little problem that you potentially could have solved yourself, you're bringing it forward. So those are the three purposes. And so actually I'll pause here and I'll give you the tour of the booklet. So the booklet, this is the Lean Daily Management Implementation Guide. This was a fun weekend project one day. I think I actually did on paper. But anyway, so this, the Lean Daily Management Implementation Plan. What is this? So what this is I put together a plan just to give us a sketch of where we're going to start on this journey. This is not the ending place. As a matter of fact, you'll notice it has a timestamp on the last updated because it changes multiple times in a day. And that's because we're actually in the process of, this whole thing is going to be an evolution. Whatever we roll out today, and we're rolling out this week and next week and the week after that, is not meant to be the final product. This is meant to be an evolution where we have 4,200 really smart people helping us make it even better and better and better and better. So how do we roll that out? How do we get people engaged? So this is the starting point. I'll give you a quick tour of the booklet. You've got your table of contents on the inside cover. Then you have your summary, which is going to talk about the 3 phases. So the 3 phases, and I'll tell you this, in the huddling world, there's 3 types of huddle. 3 types of huddle. One of them I call your safety huddle, your daily operations huddle. This is what we're worried about today. This is what's going to stop us from doing our job today. That's your daily operations, right? Then you have what I call the process improvement piece, which some people huddle about. What are we doing to make things better? What's our improvements that we're doing? And then finally, you have things that you're monitoring over time. So you might say like, over the last 6 months, this is how many blank we've had, or how many things that we've done, right? So you might have some graphs that are long-term. And I know in some of the nursing units, every month it gets updated. So you have, like your graphs with your hand hygiene graphs for the month, or whatever that graph is for the month that describes the performance for the month. Well, the goal for us is, how can we start small? So we're gonna start with the daily operations piece, and then gradually in October, we'll add on the performance or the process improvement piece. And then in December, we'll add the final monitor piece. So it'll be a slow rollout as we go through, but we're starting with just bite-sized chunks so we can allow frontline staff to really engage and see how we do this, rather than, hey, guess what? Here's 50 things you have to figure out in the next week, right? Just starting very, very slow. And we'll talk about what that first phase looks like. So you'll see on the next page where it describes the project timeline overview. That's basically what I just said in terms of phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and how that rollout will look. So that brings me to the next couple of pages with your key concepts and your definitions, which I'll go over in just a second. And then you have the different components of this. The first thing is the baseline assessment. That's what the systems engineering team did last week and the week before. We went out to as many areas as we possibly could. I think we still have to hit one tech and ask the question, are you huddling? How often do you huddle? What do you talk about? How long do you get together? Just so we could get an idea of where we're starting. So when we bring in phase 2, we want to incorporate as much as possible of what you're currently doing, rather than inventing something completely different that no one's ever seen and saying, here, go figure this one out. So we want to know what folks are already doing. So that's why we did that baseline assessment. And you'll notice at the beginning of each one of these sections is a purpose. What was the purpose of the baseline assessment? And it describes it here. Then you get to the one that I talked about earlier. This is the majority of what we're talking about today in terms of the lean daily management process, the safety huddles. And what you'll see on here is it talks about the timeline. Then you have the process, which I'll go over in a minute, and kind of what that daily schedule looks like. There's an important piece on here on the bottom of page 9, close to the bottom. It says guidance for service leadership and supervisors. First of all, caution employees to identify root causes before problem solving. And so what that is most people, if you're dealing with high-performing individuals, you identify a problem, what do people immediately want to do? Fix it, solve it, right? It's like immediately. We found a problem, let's go fix it. But in the lean methodology, what we try to teach people is stop for a moment, figure out what's really causing that issue, and then address that. Because otherwise you may only be treating symptoms. So how do we actually stop the thing from happening? And so here it's got another bullet. Encourage creative problem solving at the lowest possible level. Help staff avoid fear of failure without being afraid to try new ideas. And celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. We're going to talk about a little bit more about all 3 of those. Then you have, for the next 3 pages, what I did is I sort of created a, how does this impact me as a frontline staff member? So that's what the next one is. Then how does this impact me as a service leadership? And then finally, how does it impact me if I'm in executive leadership? I've kind of got each of those pieces, and each one has a little bit unique purpose for each of those areas. And I talked a little bit about version 2, which will come in October, and then version 3, which the ultimate goal is for every area to have what we would call a huddle board or some sort of a safety board that would guide this huddle process. And that's going to come in phase 3, probably by the end of the year. And there's 3 reasons why we didn't start with the board. Number 1, the logistics, right? How quickly can you order and buy and put out boards? 2, I have no idea what that board's supposed to look like. I'm counting on you guys and everyone else that's in the organization to help us figure out how we can build a bigger, better board, right? What is that final product going to look like? Or at least by the time it gets up on the wall, what is that version going to look like? And then the third reason is because what I've seen in some organizations is the board ends up becoming like a shrine, and the focus is all about the board. Right? And folks, it's like, did you have, yes, we went to our board. It's like, okay, but what did I say the main purpose was, right? Frontline staff engagement. So it's more about the engagement and the discussion and the brainstorming. The board is just meant to be a tool. So when we first start this, we want to stay away from a board. And then we'll introduce that later as a, here's something that might help you do this even better, but not be the very first thing that comes out of it, because then folks immediately gravitate toward, the tool becomes the end purpose. And that's not what we're shooting for, right? We're trying to make the board just be a tool, and the huddle, the discussion is the main purpose. And then in the appendices, I have kind of all the forms that we've used, and I have a rough version of Form 2 for Phase 2, and then a rough version of what a board might look like. I have a feeling that by the time we put these up in December, it's not going to look anything like this. So I'm just saying that up front. So let's go through back, if we go back to page 5, key concepts. I'm going to go through these key concepts real quick. Are we putting time?
A trick question.
Yes.
Would it be, are you open to, or leadership open to, the creation of differently organized boards depending on the area?
Perfect segue. Actually, yes, that, I'm going to talk about that in bullet number 3 here, flexibility. So yes, that is, thank you, that's a great question, is, does every board have to look exactly the same everywhere in the organization? And we'll talk about that a little bit, great question. So let me just, I'll start from the top so I don't forget to mention something. So part of leadership is that we round on the boards, and we round on the huddles, and we go and we discuss with folks about the huddle. So there's 3 conversations we need to have about the huddle. The first one is we walk up and we say, so, have you huddled recently? Do you have a huddle today? How did it go? Is that working for you? How is the process? What does it feel like? Does it feel clunky? Does it feel like it's just an extra burden? How can we make it so it's more meaningful for you and your team? You as a team, how can we make this so it's more meaningful and actually brings you benefit rather than you just feel like, oh God, it's one more thing we have to do. They mandated us to do this, right? But that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make something that actually helps you do your job better. And we're trying to allow you the opportunity to identify some issues and do that way. The second question, or the second discussion, is the whys, which I was talking about earlier. In the lean world, we use a tool called the 5 whys. That's basically, if you identify a problem, you turn into a 2-year-old and you just say why, until you finally get to the real reason why you think what may be going on. The example I've been using is, so for example, let's say you're on an inpatient unit and we're meeting in the morning, we're having our quick huddle, and we say, okay, do we have any staffing concerns today? And somebody says, yeah, we had 3 people call out. Oh my God, what do? We immediately start to fix it, right? We call somebody, we got the backup people are coming, we rearrange the responsibilities for the day, the patient load, we're trying to figure out a way to make it work. So we just don't have enough people. And I can pick on prosthetics, like, oh, we got 3 of our purchasing agents are out today. Oh, that was yesterday. It's like, how do we function with that? But now let's stop for a second and go through the whys real quick. So why? Well, because they were sick. Well, what do you mean? Well, they all had the flu. It's flu season. I mean, of course they're going to get sick. Okay, why? What do you mean why? Why'd they get the flu? Okay, you want to know the truth? Well, it's because we had that patient come through here last week who had the flu, he was positive for the flu, he was coughing and hacking on everybody. And these 3 dummies, they not only were they not wearing their PPE, they refused to cover their face, and they refused to get the flu shot. Why? What do you mean why? Why weren't they wearing their PPE? Why weren't they get the flu shot? Shh. We don't talk about that stuff. That is a personal decision. If a person wants to get the flu shot or not, that is up to them. And PPE, I'm not their supervisor. I'm not going to go tell them to put a mask on. That's not my job. The supervisor wasn't around. That's their job. Oh, so what you're really saying is that in your area, you don't have a culture of accountability, and you don't encourage each other to take the flu shot to make the place safer for each other and for the patients. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. But if we had stopped at the 3 people called in and now we've called in backup, we would have never we would have gotten down to a thing that we can actually work on. So how are we as a team going to change our culture and move things in a direction where we might actually not have this issue? Have people be more willing to get the flu shot, be more willing to call each other out if they're not wearing the proper equipment to protect themselves and the patient. So that's an example of the 5 whys. So one of the questions when we're rounding is we go to the huddle and we say, so what issues have you identified? And we say, well, we came up, we had this, this, and this. All right, were you able to get to why that may be occurring? So as part of leaders, we would coach and guide folks to start looking and asking that why question. Get down to the root cause, rather than just, oh yeah, we fixed it though, we came up with a solution. Okay, but did you have the discussion about why that may be happening? And when we get to phase 2, I want to actually add a section in somewhere that has a place to do the 5 whys, so that folks can actually jot that down and use that as a reminder to do that. And then finally, what barriers are you facing that I as a leader might be able to help you break through? What are the things that you're stuck on that I might be able to break through for you? Respect for people. So if you don't read anything else in this whole book, I encourage you to read this one paragraph later so that you can have time to really digest it. But I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. This was me, kind of my little dissertation on respect for people. So several of you may have attended the Just Culture training that we have for supervisors. And we're about to roll out Just Culture training for frontline staff in the next, possibly next week or the week after that. And the goal of that is to create an organization where employees feel psychologically safe, right? Where they feel safe to bring forward issues and say, hey, I think I might have given the wrong medication. I think I may have put my time and my leave request in improperly. And I go back and fix it. That they feel safe to bring those issues forward. Well, another piece of that is, do they feel safe, and I alluded to this earlier, do they feel safe to try something and mess it up? Have you ever wondered why staff don't get involved in problem solving? A lot of times it's because they don't want to put their neck out there. They maybe have an idea in their head of how this might work better, but they're like, I'm not gonna, because if that goes bad, they're gonna come after me. But if the supervisor or the leadership in that area can help to create an environment where we say, it's okay to fail. It's okay to mess up, as long as we're continuously trying something new and trying to make it better. So let's say it's a PAC team, and one of the frontline staff says, I have an idea. I think it's going to make everything great. And you say, okay, let's try it. We'll try it next week on Tuesday. Great. Next Tuesday comes around, and you get 50 patient complaints that day, 50. And you're like, oh my God, that was such a bad idea, but I'm so glad we tried it. So let's just not ever do that again. And what are we going to try next week? Right? Yeah, but we got 50 complaints because of my idea. Yeah, so did you do it on purpose? That's what I used to tell my kids when they would spill stuff. They start crying. They'd be like, am I punished? I'm like, did you do it on purpose? Like, no. Okay, then why would I punish you? Why would I punish you for making a mistake? It's called being human. Right? You were trying to do the right thing. You were trying to make the situation better. Why would I punish you for that? Yeah, so we had a bad outcome. Let's do some service recovery. Let's pick up the pieces and let's keep moving on. I don't know, how many of you have seen Meet the Robinsons? You guys remember that movie with Cornelius, the little kid with the yellow hair, right? For those of you who haven't seen it, I'll just give you a little snippet. There's this one scene. So there's this little kid who really likes to invent things, right? Make things. So he invents this peanut butter and jelly dispensing gun. And it's got these 2 nozzles and it spits out peanut butter and jelly, and you can like basically make a PBJ sandwich really fast, right? And he gets invited to his family's house, and he's in the house, and there's this huge family, like 10 or 12, 15 people in his family. And he pulls out his gun, he's like, let me show you my PBJ dispenser. And the thing explodes. And there's peanut butter and jelly on everything. Everything. Like, on the people, on the roof, on the table. I mean, there's PBJ everywhere. Peanut butter and jelly all over the place. People have like peanut. And this kid just like, starts trying to slide under the table because he's like, I will never get invited back to this house again, right? These people are going to kill me. And then he hears cheering. And the family is celebrating. They're like, woohoo! That was an awesome failure. He's like, what are you talking about? And they're like, man, that was such a great failure. You tried something and it failed, but wow, that was amazing. You at least tried. And he's like, I don't understand. And the mom of the family says, well, it's really simple. From failure, you learn a lot. From success, not so much. And so I love the way Dr. Flynn said it. And we were in Cleveland, and she was one of the keynote speakers. And she said, we have to start celebrating the glorious failures. celebrating glorious failures. Let the staff make mistakes. Let's respect their intelligence and their ideas and their creativity. If we truly want them to solve their own problems, then we have to let them make mistakes as they do that. I mean, I can't stress this point enough. This is so important because we're not going to go anywhere until we get to this. It's part of that psychological safety. They have to feel safe enough to try new things. And then flexibility, to go back to the question I was asked earlier, is, I remember what I said the number one purpose is, right?
Frontline staff engagement.
Frontline staff engagement. So when we roll the boards out, or we roll out the forms, or the process, or whatever, we don't want this to be cookie cutter, rigid. There may be some elements that we're like, guys, do whatever you want with it, but please keep these elements in there because we really feel like they're important. But if you have an idea that's better, let's hear it. Because your group may stumble across a best practice. That we had, food and nutrition may come back and say, you know what, we totally revamped the board, look at what we've got. It's completely different than what you told us. And I go down there and think, everybody needs to know this. This is great. This is actually better than what we originally rolled out. And we start sharing it with other folks. And they take it and they improve it even more. That's what we're looking for, is we're looking for frontline staff engagement, for folks to make this process work. I can't make this process work. There's nothing I could go into a cave for 6 months and come back with the best board, meditate, pray, be touched by the spirits, use some chemical enhancements, whatever it is I need to come up with the best possible board that I can come up with, and it will be pale in comparison to what our staff can do, or what our organization can do in a day. How do we activate them? So it's flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. Encourage them to make changes to it. Just let us know so that we can track that and we can guide and say, I know you decided this part was stupid, but can we at least explain why we feel that part's important? So if you could maybe try to do that for a little bit longer before you kill that one piece, and we may have that discussion. But we want to allow as much flexibility as possible. And celebrate, I've already talked about, celebrate the glorious failure, celebrate the wins, celebrate all the things that are working and things that are not working, celebrate the 12-pound baby, celebrate the new certification, the so-and-so graduated, whatever it is that you can celebrate. Don't miss those opportunities to celebrate the frontline staff. And then finally, elevate. Don't sit on a problem and suffer and suffer and suffer. Bring those forward and bring them up. Let's go into definitions real quick. I've already talked about the definition of humility management. The next one is high reliability organization. So many of you may have heard that we as South Texas Spectrum Healthcare System have been chosen to be one of 18 VAs in the country. So out of 150 something VAs, we were one of 18 that was chosen to be a flagship for high reliability. To start the journey of high reliability and be the leaders of the pack, right? And we had a diagnostic site visit in June. We just got the report in the last week or so. And what the team said, actually I had this conversation where they said, out of the 18 sites, if anybody is on the right track, South Texas may be at the head of the pack. I mean, they said, you as an organization, there's things you don't do that other places do better, or that, but overall, your organization, the level of, the type of employees you have, the engagement, the performance, I mean, you guys are just, like, anybody can do this. South Texas Veterans Healthcare System has got an amazing chance to really pull this off in terms of getting down to the road of high reliability. So I want to ask the question, and we'll see if you guys have any ideas, but how would you explain high reliability to, let's say, a young family member, maybe 10 years old, family member, and you're saying, hey, we're rolling out this really cool thing at work. It's called high reliability. And this 10-year-old kid in your family says, ooh, what does that mean? How would you explain that? What does it mean to you? For those of you who are kind of tracking some of this conversation.
To make sure that we're all doing approximately the same game plan, so that if we need to correct it, we all correct it together.
Okay, so making sure everybody's playing the same game, playing the same music, we're on the same sheet of music, and make sure that if we have to make a change, we're all kind of together on that. Great. Anybody else? I mean, of course I have my ideas, but my staff tells me, they're like, you know what, we can't get a word in edgewise with you. So, I'll tell you, I have 2 elevator speeches. My first one is what I call the literal elevator speech. So this is, I'm standing on the elevator, somebody's standing next to me, and they say, hey, I heard we're doing this high reliability thing. I say, yeah, it's so cool. They said, what does it mean? And then their floor, the door opens, and they're like stepping out onto their floor, and they're like, yeah, what does it mean? It's like, basically it means that in about 2 to 3 years, we're gonna be so awesome, it's gonna hurt. And then they step up onto their floor, right? That's the first definition. The second one is, I saw this when we went to St. Luke's. We went to St. Luke's Baptist, and they had this huge poster by their main elevators that said, 6 years since last catheter-associated urinary tract infection. That to me is high reliability. It means that we've identified things that we do not want to do, and then we go years without doing them. That's high reliability. In a place where it's so easy to make mistakes, because our processes are so complex. The VA definition, as they've said, their mission statement, they said that it's achieving zero harm and unmatched experience. So how do we get there? How do we bring those pieces together? And so I have this topic, I called it HRO leaders. And usually when you think about leadership, immediately your brain goes to the executive leadership team, or to service leadership, or to the supervisor. And that's what we usually think when we say leader, right, or leadership. But I wanted to expand that definition. I don't know if many of you remember Mr. Wade Velocich. He used to be our associate director. And he was in Cleveland. He was one of the keynote speakers as well. And he said something, and I cannot articulate it as well as he did. But he basically said, every single person in the organization is a leader. And if you don't believe that, just watch how people react to how other people act. He said, you by default, even if somebody who completely does not see themselves as a leader, when they do something, other people respond to that. And you end up creating a ripple in the pond, positive or negative. So whether or not you think you're a leader doesn't matter. And so what I'm looking for is what I'm calling the HRO, the high reliability organization leaders. The folks, here's the bottom line, right? I drank the Kool-Aid a long time ago. I believe this. Probably about 9-10 years ago, I drank this high reliability Kool-Aid. I just happened to be at another organization where they were rolling this out, and it was just amazing, right? But I need help passing out the Kool-Aid. So if there are folks in your area, and we've already had a couple. We ran into some issues in some of the areas, and we've had frontline staff say, hey, how can I help? I'm like, you know what might really help if you go talk to your peers over here who are like completely against any possibility of change. They may listen to you rather than me. And it's actually worked, where some frontline staff have gone and had conversations and been able to convince people, like, guys, let's try this. So we're looking for those. So if you have in your own areas, if you identify anybody, or we're recording this, if you're listening to the video and you say, I really want to be a part of it, please send them to systems engineering. We're in the Outlook as STX Systems Engineering. Send them our way. Send us those names so that we can get them engaged and let everybody be a part of this journey, and put the people out there that really want to be a part of the front of this journey. And then finally, I have a couple definitions of experience that I got from Ms. Lottie, our Chief Experience Officer. Really, the point here is I wanted to emphasize that high reliability and experience, I just mentioned that unmatched experience, are so linked. Because think about that for just a second. If I say that the primary purpose of lean daily management is frontline staff engagement, and frontline staff are engaged, they're solving their own problems, they're identifying issues and fixing them. They're sending things up and they're getting an answer back. The problems are actually being addressed, and they're having a better experience at work, and they're providing better care, so now automatically employees are having a better experience, and now they're able to provide better service and better care to our veterans, and the veterans are having a better experience. So overall, experience goes up in the organization. So when I talked about earlier, when I said about frontline staff, supervisors, cautions, one of the things I mentioned is encourage staff to problem solve at the lowest level. What that means, another piece of that is, as a supervisor or as a leader in an organization, someone in management, you may have a barrier that the staff bring up. And they say, hey, we've hit a roadblock. We can't fix this one piece. We can't get past this. And you say, okay, I'll take it. So you take it. And what do we typically do after that? we solve the whole thing, right? We fix it 100%, we wrap it in gift wrapping, we put a bow on it, and we give it back to them and say, look, we're done, we fixed it. But what if instead we said, okay, you have a barrier you can't get past, let me figure out either a way to break down the barrier or work around the barrier. So I do that, and then I give it back to you and say, okay, I broke down the barrier, now take it the rest of the way. And then once again, the staff are able to pick it up and solve the rest of the puzzle, rather than you putting up a whole fire. So that's what I mean by don't try to solve all the problems. So let's talk timelines. So I've already mentioned a little bit that well, let me go here. So this is kind of our timeline. I talked about the baseline assessment that we've done. Today is the last of our leadership training sessions here in Audie. We also have Ms. Rory Turner is in Kerrville right now doing the same session for Kerrville. And then we're going to take the show on the road and actually go out, spend a little bit of time at Data Point, visit some of the clinics, talk to the frontline staff, and help roll this out as we roll out Lean Daily Management. The plan for the schedule, we started this week, yesterday and today, on the ground level. We're gradually working our way through the ground level. We're going to each of the areas, and we're talking about the tools. We're trying to participate in some of the huddles and get folks really going. And then by next week, our plan is to get out to the rest, like start to get into the tower, second floor and the rest of the tower, and finish up Audie Murphy sometime early the week after that, early to mid the week after that. And then we're going to go spend a couple of dedicated days in Kerrville, so and actually give them some hands-on. I didn't put it on here, but our plan is to spend time at One Tech, somewhere around here, and actually go spend a whole entire day at Data Point. And then we're going to go to each of the CBOCs, including Victoria. Our plan is to actually go out to Victoria and spend some time at Victoria so that they get that hands-on, face-to-face interaction with this, rather than we mailed it to you and you figure it out.
Will that include the contract clinics?
We haven't gotten to the contract claims yet. I haven't thought about how we're going to incorporate that, but it's a great question. I'd love to brainstorm that with you and your team at some point, all the folks that are involved in that.
I don't know if you're gonna get to this or not, but I think it's a great idea, but I'm questioning because I supervise PAC social workers. So the PAC social work staff are gonna huddle with the PAC team. Then I'm told I have to huddle with all my staff. And then I have to huddle with my peers. And then we have to huddle with our leadership. And that to me sounds extremely, extremely crazy. So can you clarify for me?
Okay, good. So I will tell you, first of all, I don't have the magic sauce.
Come on,
Yeah,
you do.
I don't. I really don't. That's why I said earlier, like, I want you guys to come back and say, okay, we thought about it, we tried it, we came up with this methodology that actually works better. So that's ideal, as I would rather have the frontline staff say, this is what we think makes more sense. But I will tell you, some of the discussions we've had is that if you have your PAC social workers actually huddling with the PAC team, then that information really only needs to flow up that way. And you may have like a weekly huddle with those guys, just to say, how's the week going? Are you guys engaging with your teams? Are you participating in the huddles? Have you been an active member? Do you feel like you're an active member? Is it working? And then if there's any issues that they feel like they need to elevate to you, that you figure out a mechanism for them to get that to you before you huddle with your peers. So that's kind of how I'm imagining that. I don't know what the final version is going to look at. It's coming out of the gate, I'm telling you, we're 2 days in, and it's coming out exactly the way I thought it was, which is extremely clunky. And it's just feels awkward and weird, and it's like doesn't make any sense, and I knew that was going to happen. But if we just kind of chip away at it, I think we can come up with something that actually makes sense. It's not meant to be a burden. What I've seen happen in other organizations, I talked about people started doing it, hated it, and then actually started loving it, is that they start to realize that if it really works the way it's supposed to, what folks realize is that that extra 10 or 15 minutes they spent in the beginning of the day actually made the rest of the day better. So if I go to an area, so one of the questions folks have asked me is, how do you know, what's the measure of success? How do you know that this was successful in your rollout? And I said a couple things. One, if I go to an area, right, so let's say, since you picked on PAC team, I'm trying to see if there's a, let's do lab, right? Let's say I go to the lab, and I'm standing in front of one of the lab areas, and I say, so, did you guys huddle today? And they say, yes, we huddled. Great, check the box, you can say you huddled, right? And then I said, well, what did you talk about? Was there any issues that were raised? And they said, well, yeah. Okay, wait a minute, how long did you huddle again? It was about a minute and a half. Okay, what were the issues that came up? Because you said a couple issues came up. I don't remember. Our supervisor said we have to do it, so we're doing it, and it's like, we got it done in a minute and a half, and we went on and did the rest of our real job. To me, that's not a successful implementation. If I go to an area and I say, let's say lab, I go back to lab and I'm saying, so did you huddle today? And they said, are you kidding? We would miss our huddle. Did you catch the operative word there? Hour, right? It's like, that is the best part of our day. That's when we solve our problems. That's when we identify the things that keep us up at night and we fix them. So we would hate to miss that. That to me is successful implementation. If I go out, once we get the boards out, and I go out to a board and I say, let's say the secretary's coming and he wants to see our boards and our huddles. And somebody said, oh, you gotta go to the board over here. There, it's like on so-and-so area. And I go and I look at the board and it is picture perfect. It looks beautiful. And we could take a picture and send it to the national newsletter, right? And then I started talking to the staff and they hate that darn thing. And it's like, it's an extra 10, 15 minutes of the day and the supervisors hate it because they're having to do these 6 different huddles and they're going crazy. And I would never take the secretary there. But I go to this other area, like let's say I go to police and they have a huddle board and it looks like crap. And I go look at it and I'm like, okay, what is this? And I start talking to some of the officers and they're like, oh man, we love this thing. And they get so excited. They're like, yeah, this morning we figured out the service dog thing, and we got this, and we got that, and and it's like, here, see, right here, this one little box, that's where Joey figured out this. And, you would feel like there's some engagement. So if it feels burdensome, chances are it is. So we have to figure out a way to make it more sense. So push back on and I've had this conversation with your boss. too.
I'm sure you had, because he had that conversation with us today.
Right, I've had the same conversation that if it's not making sense, okay, try something different, do something different. Don't just keep muddling through and being miserable, because that's not the goal. Figure out a way that makes sense, and what actually makes sense as an organization. But I feel your pain. Like I said, I don't have the magic sauce.
So do you want us to continue to use the huddle boards that we already have that go through shared governance? Do we need a separate huddle board?
If you have, okay, so let's,
Because we have the ones that do the
Oh, yeah.
PDSA cycle and,
so let me talk about this real quick. The last thing, actually, this is the last thing, and I know I only have like a couple of minutes, so you guys have a handout. This is what we're using. We're using what I call the portable board.
okay,
So the topics we're using are safety, methods, equipment, supplies, and staffing. And then I've got a little section for announcements. That's where you can put that, hey, don't forget to take your own employee survey. Don't forget to go dump the director tomorrow. Whatever it is that you want to put in that section. But in the other sections, what you can do, and there's instructions on the back and examples. Some of the examples, I was struggling, so if you have better examples, we'd love to hear them. But, safety concerns. So you say, okay guys, do you have any safety concerns today? And it may not be in your area. So for example, one of the examples I put on here is, for us, we're sitting in systems engineering, okay, full disclosure, right? I'm going to be full disclosure. When we first rolled this out, we've been huddling for about 3 weeks now. And it was about 2.5 weeks in that my team said to me, why are we using this? Isn't this what you're going to tell everybody else to use? And literally, these words, now keep in mind, I'm the one who wrote the book, right? These words came out of my mouth and I went, ah! I said, this doesn't apply to us. I couldn't believe I said it. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just said it. And then I went on and I said, we're the people who are teaching everybody how to use it, but how is this even going to apply to it, right? And so these guys pushed back on me. They said, no, we think we should use it. If you're telling it, we should practice what we preach. And I'm imagining we're going to go NA, right? And we start going through the list. We had already just huddled for 20 minutes. And in 5 minutes, we identified 6 things we had not talked about because we followed this process. And I was like, wow, now I have truly drank the Kool-Aid. Like, this actually helps. It helps structure the conversation. So the topics are safety concerns. The safety concern I brought up that day was, we started thinking about it, we're like, we don't have any safety concerns. And I said, wait, I do have one. Ever since the elevators have been down, I've noticed more and more patients in the stairwell, some of which I'm really questioning should be in the stairwell or not. I don't know what to do with that information, but it does keep me up at night. Like, I'm worried I'm going to find a patient laying in the stairwell because they were like sick of waiting for the elevator and decided to take the stairwell, right? So how do we do that? The methods is processes. what processes do we have? It might be a template in CPRS, it might be some other process, process for shift change, something else in the organization. And you have equipment, that's your hard stuff. You'll notice I put CPRS as an example. That's not, CPRS is not working right, that's CPRS is down. We can't log into your computer and do our job today. That to me would be an equipment issue. One of the ones that went up yesterday was we were having AC issues at one of the facilities, which never happens, of course. But you know, so we put that on there. Supplies are your reusable disposable items. That when we got to that one, I'm like, you know, we're rolling this out next week in like 3 days. And do we have any whiteboard markers that people can use to write on this? It's like, nope. So we had to like emergency order a bunch of whiteboard markers that we could get out. But luckily we went over supplies and we saw that. And then staffing, that's the, do we, you know, are people out, are people on orientation, are people in training that, can they function at the full capacity? Do we need to do something different? So this is the new process. I will emphasize, please don't destroy something that's working. Don't throw it out and say, okay, I know we've been huddling every day for the last 6 years, but we're stopping that now, and we're doing this new thing because leadership has said we're going to do this. No. This is meant to be a thin layer on top of whatever it is that you're already doing, just to give a little bit of structure, to get us all, you know, I think as Dr. Haney said, to get us on that same sheet of music, so that there's some alignment. When we talk about aligning our efforts, how do we align those efforts? They're great questions. That's the final thing. For those areas that want to get a head start, I do not want to discourage anyone. If you're like, you know what, I think I'm going to start this week, but you said you're not coming till late next week or the week after, feel free to go in and pick up. We've got a few of these laminated cards and some markers. If you want to go and pick them up and start playing with it and trying it in smaller groups and seeing how to make it work, that's fine. It's perfectly fine. You can go ahead and get started on it. We're going to show up at that schedule just because there's just not enough of us. But you're more than welcome, and if you have questions, call, email, say, hey, we started playing with it, but we're a little confused about this piece, or that piece doesn't make any sense. How do we, you know, here's what we thought of doing differently. Do you have any suggestions? Okay. I've eaten up all your time.
One quick question, because question I get mostly from admin units are like, I don't know if it makes sense for us to communicate today, and I'm like, I don't think you should, if that's what you think.
Well,
Is that
so,
okay?
okay, so that may be the case, but remember what we're trying to establish is a daily cadence. It's a rhythm. We're trying to build a daily rhythm. It's a daily rhythm. It may be a really quick discussion. It may be virtual. It may be over Skype. It might be on the phone, on a advanced line. It might, you know, I have an electronic fillable PDF version of this, so if it's if you're reading electronically, and you want the electronic version, just let me know, I'll send it to you.
The list within 4, anything added?
Anything added? Anything else? Okay, 5 minutes, we're done. You know, it may not be that, but it's about establishing that daily rhythm. So I am encouraging people, do you have to meet first thing in the morning? They recommend that because it goes back to that whole, we're meeting and then we go out onto the field, right? But for some of yours, that may be completely impractical. So you might meet at the end of the day the day before. And then the next morning you come in and you say, okay, anything new that we found out about this morning from what we talked about last night? Nope, okay, good, go. And then you meet again at the end of the day. So whatever makes sense. Is that what you guys are doing?
Yeah, that's what we're doing in the nursing manager.
Yeah. And you know, that make the most sense. So I'm not dictating when. I am encouraging folks to try the daily thing at least initially coming out of the gate. Try the daily thing. Let's try to make that rhythm go. Because it's about, like I said, it's about establishing that rhythm. And if you're meeting once a week, a lot happens in a week. And you think, you know what, I didn't think it was going to be that much, but how are you going to? Because it's not only what issues do I have, because later we're going to start talking about what progress are we making to fix some of these issues. So how are we going to do that if we're only talking about it once a week versus every day? Are we making incremental changes and incremental improvements? Okay. I apologize for trying to conclude this one. Thank you guys so much. Do you have any questions?